Lies of P starts off via the awakening of a puppet named Pinocchio. The world is both more and less advanced than our own. It's full of other puppets, and if you have a fear of mannequins or similar, I wouldn't ever advise that you watch this. You have been warned. Now, I'm going to pretend I haven't played through this intro portion a ton of times, and...
Arm yourself with one of the weapons over there.
Yeah, I don't know about that. This game has a really cool system around assembling your weapons to customize what they can do, but that sounds complicated, and I'm a simple person. And today, for those that haven't read the title, I'm taking a different approach. Look out, game! Pinocchio's hitting the streets, faces, and nothing is gonna stop me. And yes, this is on purpose. This may be a Souls-like, but I don't have the bonfire equivalent yet. I can't level, nor can I respawn enemies via anything other than death, so die I did. Repeatedly. There are no unarmed attacks in the game. Quite the contrary, when you don't have a weapon, you have the option of consumables and your left arm that uses a bar that isn't nearly long enough to defeat a mandatory enemy that stands between me and the rest of the game. At the moment, I can only recover that bar via dying, which obviously doesn't help much, so instead I used it to farm gears. They don't do much, but they're throwable, and they deal damage. You can carry up to 30, so they'll be supplementing all of the things that I can't do. I'm at least fairly sure that you could carry 99 of them in the demo version of the game. That being said, you also couldn't dodge if you didn't have a weapon equipped, which was a really weird choice, and I'm glad they reversed it. After an unnecessary amount of farming, I had enough gears to throw to get the key out of this place, and I was allowed into the world proper. The Blue Fairy is calling me forward, and has granted me the ability to level up. Sort of. I can only go up to level 20, which is both fantastic, and just... why level 20? It seems so arbitrary. That will go up later, but either way though, after some more farming, I went around collecting all the different consumables that I could around the map. They were going to be vitally important for my forward progress, as between my limited level, Legion gauge, and my gears just generally being bad, I didn't have a lot of options. Through my journey, I'd find guys such as this one, and make no mistake, they are far more important to this run than I am. This one in particular, less so, but still, he has a couple of throwables that I'm going to desperately need. The game takes a moment to look rad as hell because this whole thing is incredibly stylish and pretty, and I'm introduced to the first boss. A single charge punch looks like it's going to make this fight easy, but I just don't have enough of those left in me. I gave the thing a closer look at my gear collection before tossing some electric bombs, which did a ton of damage, as they tend to do. Otherwise, not much to say about this big guy. Neat design and all. Not a terrible introduction. Now the game introduces the lying mechanic that was of course coming, and it's not my favorite. This one doesn't seem optional, and the rest are sort of just not great in framing or function. I don't like lying in general, and it's not always clear what the truth is. That being said, I made it into the gorgeous Hotel Krat, and with the ability to level, the game can truly begin. I did get a new Legion arm, but it's so bad on so many levels. I'm sure it'd be a lot more fun and useful in a different playthrough, but in this one, it does about as much damage as my left toe, which is to say it'll only hurt me in the long run. Also, you cannot pet the cat, which hurts in a different way. Back on the streets of general death and misery, you may have been able to put it together that a good majority of the puppets have more or less lost it, indiscriminately killing people, and so I'm here doing the same to them, because I need the resources mostly. Outside of farming, I more or less just avoided all conflict because I only have enough Legion to kill a small handful of foes. Enemies track you incredibly well with their attacks, even to a genuinely frustrating degree that I wouldn't say is particularly fun, but running past them is still super viable. You can even roll into enemies to temporarily stun them at least once. It seems like there's an internal cooldown on when you can do that to them, but it's still really nice. Also, the level design in this game, generally pretty gorgeous, much like the model design and the sound design. And while this game and I may have had some disagreements, it is so damn pretty. As is this beautiful bastard. It's not much, but he sells Legion magazines, which gives me a small amount of my gauge back. Between him and the shopkeep in the hotel, I have a little bit of consumable damage at ridiculously high prices, but I can at least recover resources without having to farm the painfully low drop chances. As much. Next up would be considerably faster. Mad Donkey can maneuver more like a player, and he's considerably more dangerous for it. But also, he's really squishy. I traded some blows with him because despite being a boss, it's pretty dang viable. For the last bits of health he had, I hit him with some electricity. All in all, he was easier than the last one, and this would be where Pinocchio realizes that he murdered a person, which is directly against the Grand Covenant that binds puppets in what they can and can't do. But also blood, censorship, and YouTube monetization. I also saved my father from an attempted murderer. He's very manipulative, though. Generally speaking, if a parental figure is trying to say or do anything that appears potentially loving, my assumption is that they want something. That being said, love languages vary. Some people might enjoy things like touch. Hugs and kisses could be lovely, or it could be a terrible option. Everyone expresses love a little bit differently, and they receive it a little bit differently. In the same way that not everyone wants to be touched, even by loved ones, sometimes words of affirmation can do more harm than good. It's important to be willing to learn and respect how the people you care for want to be loved. An act that feels selfless to you can feel incredibly selfish to them. Generally speaking, we also give and receive love differently from person to person. Sometimes even your partner just doesn't want to be hugged by you, even if they want to be hugged by somebody else. As always, be it romantic or platonic, communication is key in relationships. Also, I'm fairly sure less ergo drops from enemies in this versus the demo. Not long after the last boss, I found this thing, and I can't always show as much as I want to during these things. I could talk for an hour about loads of things, like how cool I think this boss is from a design standpoint. I could wax lyrical about the theory of art, animation, and the characterization of movement. How even the littlest of mannerisms that went into making it a reality brought out an imposing but impressive foe. But if I get too deep into the topic, well, the run took about 48 hours, and I don't think most folks would be interested in seeing the whole thing from beginning to end. This game is full of ups and downs to talk about. For instance, a boss like this is difficult for a run with this rule set. I could absolutely farm loads of levels to beat this under horrible conditions, but I don't want to. And this might be a divisive choice, but in this and a good handful of other bosses, I would back up my save, because right now I don't have access to a handful of throwables that I'll need to get through this. So if I fail, I would have to restart entirely, or farm an ungodly amount. So instead, I would exit out and replace my save with a new one to get my stuff back. It would save hours of farming that would be wasted just to achieve the same effect, so technically it is save scumming, and I'll be honest, I don't even feel remotely bad for it. Anyways, my Legion arm was best to use during phase 1, as it's the least aggressive. I'm not good at dodging at the best of times, and so leaving my ranged options for when it's doing its really angry lightning attacks felt like the best move. It didn't feel too good though when I got to the end and it still had plenty of health to spare. After a lot more farming and a lot of luck though, I was able to push through by burning supplies that I had no way to get back. Luckily, dear old dad is here to assure me that he loves me dearly and wants me to throw myself into a dangerous situation for his benefit. How charming. Bright side of things, I found a new place to farm with a new arm. These dudes can drop a ton of different consumables and give a fair bit of currency, so I spent a lot of time here. I did also take the time to fight a giant robot sitting in a poison swamp. Miyazaki, what have you done to gaming? This wasn't so bad. As you can see, the thing isn't exactly a speed demon, so ranged options made this a breeze. I'm so glad that I decided to fight this before draining the area, so I had a lovely experience of having my health constantly slipping away. Can you imagine if I would have been patient instead? That would have been ridiculous. I'm here clearing out a puppet factory to at least stop the creation of new units in an endless army, and I gotta say, this place is almost nothing but OSHA violations. And aside from the many questions I have regarding the functionality of this place, it's also very reminiscent of another game within the genre. I have mixed feelings with how much was borrowed. I think it tends to be at its best when it's doing its own thing. I take it back, I hate these two. As for the survivor fight, it suffers a similar problem as every other human boss, which is less a problem and more of a feature. Humans are quick and deliberate. My current arm does a ludicrous amount of damage, but it's also incredibly slow. And if I don't let go before being hit, I lose my legion, get hurt, and I've got nothing to show for it. So with them often staying out of range and hopping in to smack me around quickly, they can be a bit harder to deal with than most other foes. They can also dodge projectiles a fair bit better, which is expensive, but they also don't have a lot of health to work with. All in all, could be better, could be worse. Nope! No. Not today! After stumbling around in circles for a long while, I managed to find my way to Vanini, and of all characters in all the world, I really didn't expect him to be the one to grow on me, but he needs saving, and this place needs closed. Time to kill two birds with a lot of random bullshit. Somehow this big robot-looking thing is more or less the only thing keeping this place running. At first I figured I could take cover from it, which was short-lived. It is fast enough, though, that a lot of my attacks were simply trades. Not a strategy I would generally suggest trying with a boss, but it's more viable in the long run than you might think. It has fury attacks, much like a lot of enemies. After the boss flashes red, out comes an attack that you can't iframe through, nor can you block. Not that I'm able to block anyway. You can parry it if you've got a weapon to use, but if you're unsure of why that's a problem, I'd like to refer you back to the video title. With some careful play, you can get out of the way of most of these attacks. Not all of them, but we'll get to that. After bleeding health and resources alike, though, I was able to push through phase 2 with the same strategy that I've been using. Really not so bad if we ignore the room-sized AoEs that give damage over time. Why are there always mine-like areas in these? They've always got the same aesthetic, with explosives just haphazardly strewn about the place like they've never even heard of the concept of proper storage. Regardless, for saving one of my favorite rich boys, I'm rewarded with another new arm, and it doesn't look like much right now, But this was an asset to the run that I severely undervalued, and for that, my dear Flame, I apologize. Stepping into this area felt surreal. Given the general style and design of the game up until this point, I expected, well, not this. It's pretty subtly different, but the more naturally inclined environment was a fantastic change of pace. It felt like a breath of fresh air, and it wasn't long, but if absolutely nothing else, this game is a visual treat. I have my problems with the title as a whole, but it is absolutely gorgeous to observe. Next up, though, is a person who wants to wound me to prevent me from venturing into a place that I'll surely perish. A misguided means of helping, but they would pass. Like all humans before them. Like all after. The biggest difference was just how aggressively they moved. I was able to bring them down with a series of shocks to their system before their electrocution. Surprisingly easy, if a bit more morally dubious. Into the next place, though. Is that a zombie? Did this game just introduce zombies? In my steampunk Souls-like? Yeah, okay, that seems cool. Also, I found this guy out here just handing out an incredibly helpful cube. Fitting that it should fall within my possession, but thank you nonetheless. It won't do much for me now, but in time. Damn. Graphics don't make a game, but a passionate art team works wonders. That being said, I don't like this place. The visuals are great, the enemy layout and the encounters are fun, it's punishing, fun to explore, and there's a lot to love here. I genuinely really enjoyed the verticality and figuring out how to handle the enemies while also not dying to my own 2 left feet, but the run-up back to this place is so long. It's an issue with a lot of places where you'll spend something like half a minute just getting back to the part where you get to play the game. If it's about punishing the player for failure, then I already died. I have to redo all of the combat I just did. Is that not enough? Why put the last rest so far from where this place actually begins? Also, at some point, I realized that fire versus flesh made a lot more sense than trying to brute force things with my electric hand. It also doesn't force you to commit nearly as hard to each attack. You can get little gouts of flame in here and there. It's far less all or nothing, and I appreciate that when dodging is only becoming more important by the minute. Also, while this isn't even technically a boss, I'd like to say I hated this thing's fight. With how well a lot of enemies track, and it being one giant moving hitbox, it didn't really feel like there was anything I could do about it. Like, wow, wasn't that a cool and inspired combo that killed me before I even knew what happened? Even with a shortcut, I have to make the same run-up that has me spending significantly more time traveling than actually playing. Decisions like this just feel disrespectful of my time as a player. Hi, Susan. Frankly, if the game isn't going to play fair, then neither am I. Welcome to ranged builds, you nasty little thing. Afterwards, I give over a box of items so I can buy them back from the hotel. Does anyone want to explain to me how this made sense to literally anyone involved? It's not like I'm bringing infinite supplies here. It's one box that I could have simply kept. Coming back, I found a guy as lost as I usually am who needs a place to go. Claims he's some legendary hero and I direct him back to the hotel. Dude's a prick, though. That being said, he does sell boss weapons! On my journey through, I found what's become of an Archbishop here. And a lot of the imagery used throughout this game is nothing short of inspired. Other bits are more body horror-esque, which I didn't expect coming into a game about Pinocchio, but I'm not complaining. Well, not about that specifically, anyway. I ended up swapping to fire because it's my best bet by far here. This thing doesn't really give great windows for electric hand to shine. I tried to save fuel by applying a fire DOT and backing off. It costed most of the resources on my person, but I managed to beat the giant frog-looking dude. Or rather, I beat Phase 1. This is a cool boss. I'm not going to deny that. Phase 2 functions differently depending on which side you're facing. It's a neat concept, but it's dangerous and incredibly tanky to boot. I just don't have enough resources to even sort of stand a chance here. I can't imagine the farming required to do this because the ergo drops don't really even scale that much throughout the game. By the end, basic mobs are giving relatively pretty little and leveling is hard. So making what is likely another rather divisive decision, I'm not using a weapon. My AI companion, they're doing their own thing, and they're the only real chance I have to get through this. I just don't really have the damage otherwise, so I started the fight by applying burn whenever I could and throwing all of my gears. If this was going to take all of my damage, I wanted to apply the worst of it up front. Phase 2 was a matter of killing it as quickly as I could, throwing everything I have for one simple reason. It could one-shot me with incredible ease. Massive AoEs that instantly end the fight aren't exactly my jam, so when I managed to send the boss out of it during my last attempt, I knew this had to be the one. My Spectre lasted just long enough to see me over the finish line, and I understand why this fight might be the one that seals the fate of the run in some folks' eyes, but in mine, well, I still ain't holding a stabber of any kind. There is a cartoonishly evil dude laughing as he absorbs a bunch of ergo from the things that I've killed, though. Vanini, being the awesome person that he is, wants to help find the root cause of the puppets attacking people. It's suspected that it might have to do with the King of Puppets, so finding him would likely be a good course of action. Along my way would be all manner of monster, many of which were simply better to ignore and run past because I never upgraded my health and I can't kill things quickly without spending a fortune. I met up with a backstabbing duo of the hour, and they're not even subtle about being terrible people. Luckily, they're at least useful when pushing through the place. Sort of. Enemies heal slowly over time. These ones heal faster, and these two are, they're certainly one of the damage sources of all time. They do abandon you quite quickly, which was to be expected. Not a huge loss. I did finally happen across arguably the single most important NPC to this whole run. Up until this point, I could only purchase a few consumables. I spent a lot of hours farming the rest out manually, just hoping for good drops that never really came. But after a quick bribe and under horrific pricing, I finally have access to an arsenal. This man single-handedly took more of my money than every other vendor in the game combined, and I thanked him for it. I am still thanking him for it. He may not have been the make or break in this run being possible, but he's the mental break that I needed. He is the strength in my every step past this point. He was the sigh of relief of a person tired of hoping RNG would bless a run that had no right to get anywhere at all. I may have been the person to make this challenge a reality, but this one NPC is the reason I had any fun doing it. Whichever person or persons put this hero in my life with this inventory, thank you. On the contrary though, whoever gave me this boss fight, I'm not so sure that we can be friends. The intro cutscene may be stylish as hell, but the devs really looked at all the double bosses and all the world and said, I can make it worse. Here we have a guy that can shred what little health I have, and when he gets lower, he brings in his family members. Each has a different moveset and strategy to play around. Luckily, I only need to beat the eldest to get through, but it ends up being me desperately running and trying to fight back, all while being thrashed by a band of 4 full-fledged foes. Any one of them could have made at least a fairly competent mini-boss, but instead I get to deal with 4 on extremely limited supplies, of which I had enough to get through, if only just. A lot of them I hadn't even had the chance to try before this fight due to costs.
Damn you. You'll pay for that.
What are you gonna do? Kill me? The exact thing you were trying to do before? Because I really hope I don't need to explain why that's not an effective threat to use as a result of me having fought back. I managed to get back to the hotel where I found my sickly friend had successfully found a magical treat. In addition to getting to help him with his research and potentially saving his life, he now trades in fruit for witch stones. The fruit you can get on a real-world timer. 1 fruit every 10 minutes, up to 8, and you have to come here in the least convenient place to reach in the entire hub, and I kind of hate that decision. It's just intrusive, and this is the only way to get the currency necessary to respec, which I still can't do by the by, and it's the only currency my friend accepts to get said witch stones. They can be used to get some minor buffs, restore some resources, and even buff specters. As far as I know, it's the only way you can heal your specter. For me, and this run, this is optional in the same way that breathing is. Dear old dad wants me to finally go see that big old puppet king, still treats me in an incredibly uncomfortable fashion, and I'm off to do a slew of new encounters. There are a lot of repeat enemies throughout the game, but I only really noticed while writing the script that the variety is genuinely kind of incredible. Just in this one house, I went from being attacked by familiar mobs to a new maid-like mob, to an explosive jester, to a baby puppet enemy type. Other than being creepy, they're really not a threat though. As we all know, babies can't climb stairs because they're stupid, so I'm perfectly safe here on the 2nd floor. Oh god, they're learning! Right outside, there are gun-based enemies and stationary foes that throw bombs. Both are obnoxious, but again, variety. The follow-up performance would be a singer who lost her spotlight, brutally killing puppets with no heed for who they are. Had she even the slightest bit of care for her targets, her song might not have hit such a sour note. We may dance to the same rhythm. We may circle the same key. She'd find my step to be slow, often choosing to move back rather than to the side, but I'd eventually get the point. She may have flowed through a lot of my attacks, but at the end of the day, we were on 2 different melodies, and only one could be allowed to continue. It's a shame. She could have been a phenomenal ally. Could have been a duet, but now you're nothing but another victim of the stage. Up a street of fire, bombs, and general unpleasantness is a boxing clown bot. One that you can run right past if you want, which is great, especially because there's a place to rest right after. Makes second attempts a lot easier, but this thing kept punching me, so I started to get some use out of the gun arm. It scales primarily off of technique. I'm currently spec'd into motivity and advance. For those that don't know, this means that I'm spec'd into strength and magic instead of dex. Despite this, it does relatively good damage and a lot more than I'm going to be able to do in melee range anyway. This will be the last of the 3 arms I really used for the bulk of the game. And I'm not even going to show it this time. The next area is really pretty. It was a lot of fun to navigate. It's praiseworthy all around, except for one major factor. The next area has spider lady puppets, and I don't appreciate that. Shame on you, game. Shame. Also, a more minor note, the swinging bit on a crosswalk is right before the boss on the run-up. I didn't get hit by it once, but I hate that it exists. Having to restart a boss is its own punishment. Why make me jump through hoops to try again? Speaking of, though, next is the Puppet King. Seems like a swell kind of fella up until his handshake is swatted away. Genuinely rude on the side of P, but then PK got kind of murdery about it. Honestly though, I think I quite enjoyed the fight. His movement through it feels so unique. He oozes style, and he feels mostly manageable, while also still being really imposing. There are a couple of attacks that feel a little less fair, but I don't think I have many real complaints except that he has a pretty small health pool. Oh, phase 2. And phase 2 is literally nothing like the first one. As in, nothing you learn with the first phase will do anything to help carry you through this incredibly fast-moving and aggressive follow-up fight. So the dude's real name is Romeo, and he's really cool, don't get me wrong. This game never really stopped flexing just how stylish it is, and I respect that, but I don't know. It never felt good finding out there was a phase 2. I never got to be excited about a new boss. It was just like, surprise, you mismanaged your resources, and that probably would have been better on a different run. That is on me, but healing has its own limits, and it really took the sense of accomplishment out of some fights. I'd sit just watching them die to process whether or not I'd really achieved something. I don't know, it's not exclusive to this game. I just don't think it's something that I've considered much historically, and to most folks, it probably is a non-issue. That probably is at least close to where it sits for me as well, but it's something I observed through the run. Anyway, he's dead. The puppets on the street more or less just seem lost. Still aggressive, but lost, and I'm off to find people who may or may not be able to help with the plague that's sweeping the whole city. The attention to detail in this game is amazing, like how my shirt is stained by the various things I roll in, but I'm in a cellar flooded by wine using a flamethrower. I really hope that I don't have to explain why that's an issue. Well, this isn't a perfect game, and really, jokes aside, there are a lot of issues. Enemy tracking is ludicrous, the difficulty curve is terrible. There are a lot of quality of life things that you have to spec into, and you can only spec into if you explore just the right locations. The Fury attacks in general feel like a bad idea for the genre that tends to support so many different playstyles. I don't know, if I'm being honest, there are a lot of reasons to hate this game. There are even more to love it. In its current state, I think it's a good game, and I think it absolutely deserves praise, but I don't think it's a great game. It does make me incredibly excited to see what the devs might deliver on the next go, because if absolutely nothing else, this is some phenomenal potential. No, please! No more quad weapon robots, I just played Armored Core! Also, genuinely, this might be my single least favorite place in the entire game. These raptors are a pain in every sense of the word, and it was one of many places that had me say, oh, it's like that thing in Dark Souls, but it's worse. At the end of the place, though, was Victor. Despite the blue vats, his last name is not Freeze. Evolution has always been real and is a well-documented phenomenon. Now, Victor feels extremely out of place in terms of how he fights. He's very punchy. He's quick but slow in ways that are really hard to describe to someone that hasn't played the game personally. He doesn't move like a person. He doesn't move like a monster. He sure as hell ain't a robot. And I want to clarify, I think he's fantastic for it. He's not super hard to dance around when throwing hands, but it was really fun to do. He phase transitions at half health instead of gaining a new bar, and he gains some new moves that are difficult but manageable. It really felt like trying to outdex a strength build in the best way. It was incredibly satisfying to play against. Terrible person, but great boss. No. Modified. Evolution occurs over generations, not all in one creature. A caterpillar does not evolve into a butterfly. That's not how that works. Also, looking at you, popular franchise about monsters and pockets that is closely associated with a company that gets really lawsuit happy. The game then introduces the big bad, who's so cartoonishly evil that he's against you even if you agree with him. Like, dude, pick a lane. Long and short of it, though, is that Ergo is people. Puppets are sort of people-fueled. Some wake up in their new body. Also, they're derived from the plague that's killing people. It got complicated really fast, but he's also trying to use the people juice to mutate other people in the search for an advancement of the species. I get not liking red tape, but you could have whole teams of people helping you if you just listen to the ethics board. These two are manipulative to their very core, claiming we're now friends despite insulting and abandoning me because they need something. Then I found a puppet graveyard. Also, this man is 100% not the person he claims to be. Overheard him talking about actively betraying the hotel. As in, my home, the hotel. He did sell me a ring that makes all of my arms significantly stronger, though, so that's nice. After were two puppets of the future. Both more or less just boiled down to throwing things from where they couldn't reach. Easy upgrade materials, if nothing else. After wandering through a terrible area that got me killed several times, I eventually found my way back to an optional boss that's been helping to cure the sick by killing them. Not exactly a good care plan, nor a good boss arena. This place is tiny, but he's just a human. And then came what I think is genuinely my least favorite boss in the game. It has a fury attack that's a charge, as in you need to parry it. I successfully avoided it by strafing once. Ever. And I'm not sure how. It moves faster than me, tracks incredibly well, and I genuinely hate this fight for one single move. As usual, I love its design, but when trying to put down the beast, there would come attacks that I simply couldn't answer. There maybe is a world in which I could get good enough to consistently avoid it, but I hate that every other boss, literally every other boss in the game, has at least 2 answers to their fury attacks. And this more or less just has one. I'm not saying I should be rewarded for playing the game in a way that the devs didn't intend. I'm saying that worse players shouldn't be punished for playing the game in a way that they find fun. Parries aren't fun for all players, and with this one exception, you really aren't forced to use them. Possibly one other, but we'll get to that. They almost had such a good track record for handling things in the way that you want. But I more or less just had to tank through these, bleeding health and bursting it down before I ran out of healing. It's a 2-phaser, and phase 2 has you mostly just dodging through its attacks. You can weirdly go through it during its charge attacks, which made it possible at all. But insult to injury, beating it gives you a ridiculously heavy amulet that lets you dodge through red attacks, keeping in mind that it's the only one that makes it potentially necessary. I ended up having to go back through places that I've been, but not really. This is how you reuse areas. Other devs, take notes. This had a completely different feel. Exploring different parts of the same location, new enemies, new challenges, new lore. Again, a lot to love. I did struggle a bit with this particular human. Fun fact, the human location isn't reset upon my death, and also different enemy categories will fight each other. Humans also aggro a lot further than most enemy types, so I managed to lure her into fighting a bunch of dudes doing a lot of the work for me, while also keeping her still enough to toss things. I then found out that she's afraid of stairs. The AI in this game leaves a lot to be desired, but honestly, I think that tends to favor me more than not. Okay, I may have just walked out into Neo, but seriously, this game is gorgeous. What isn't gorgeous is this tiny arena with an incredibly aggressive foe. It always jumps out at the same spot, which is blocked by wood. I wasn't really sure how to handle this thing given how hard it is just to stay alive for long enough to even throw things. The solution was the game breaking and the wood not spawning. That's it. That's how I got through this fight. Dude never even got into the arena. Next was an actual boss, and it was going to take a lot of learning of patterns and strategies to stand a chance. I was hanging out with some folks in Discord, link in the description by the way, when we were workshopping how I could maybe cheese this fight. As it turns out, you can throw something, fall down onto the floor below, climb back up, and the AI just doesn't really reactivate when you do. This is it. This is the boss fight. Try not to be too impressed. At the time, I was failing miserably to contain my laughter because this was certainly a boss fight. Enjoy it before it's inevitably patched. I hated this portion of the game though. You can't fast travel anywhere, you can't backtrack, you can't do anything. It's a narrative portion of the game that you're given no warning for. Had I not come in with the supplies necessary, well, I don't know if you can farm anything to get out of it. Poor form game. I get it from a narrative perspective. It's hard to actually fault you for that. It was pretty cool. But also, screw you! In all fairness though, it really could have been worse. It was sort of a refight, sort of not. It behaves a lot more like a monster than the robot from before. Every failure meant reloading a save because I didn't know when I was going to get to restock, and no. It summons mobs, which, no. The shock status increases damage from other sources, so I more or less just burst it down before its aggression could be the end of me. Or its friggin' mobs. The poser, who is also a traitor, was actually a traitor all along! Who would have guessed? Well, the hotel guests are now relatively safe, with the exception of my father, who was kidnapped, and me to go after him, as well as our attackers. Some familiar faces, and ones that did what they did simply to send a message. This time, I have to beat all 4. With the Spectre by my side, it's us against 4 monsters, because that's all they are. They're so stuck into their own egos that they don't care who they hurt. Truth be told, I couldn't bring myself to upgrade my tools until now. Not a single arm upgrade despite sitting on the materials for it, terrified that I'd need them for a different arm with how limited they are and how this game treats respecking. But for them, the flames would cleanse their sins, as it would flick and sputter across their rotten flesh, tainted to the core. I'd simply need to carry the fire to where there was more to clean. The blasts it was capable of exuding would push them around the same way that they used to treat others. Fire has been our closest companion. It delivered us from the cold. It protected us from disease and our food. It taught us more than we could ever hope to learn when humanity was young. I am not the Inferno, merely her tool to teach your final lesson. One in but a sliver of pain compared to what you've caused. Though your brotherhood has chosen to be clad in the same color as carbon deposits blackened and stained in the lives you've stolen, you'll find that your legacy will fade as quickly as the light from your eyes, into an ashen white. Anyways, Geppetto is a traitor. Could have told you that hours ago. Also, I got to burn this guy. I expected a boss, but you always were disappointing. I finally found a way to the island of Alchemists and home of the Big Bad. It is incredible. Seriously, whatever the art team was paid, it wasn't enough. Also, my old name was Carlo. Romeo was my best friend, and I more recently murdered him, so that's neat. This boss had me genuinely wondering whether or not this run was possible. For those that don't know, I've never played this game before. I did a little bit of labbing in the demo, and that's more than I normally do. This is my first playthrough, and this thing is incredibly hard for this build. It's resistant to pretty much everything. My electric hand that does around 1,000 damage, it does closer to 20. Acid? Yeah, sure, if you'd like to try fighting a hippo with a glass of distilled water as your only weapon. It getting stunned can kill me. Everything it does is incredibly high damage. This whole fight was just painful. The absolute worst part, though, I got an upgrade that has me regenerating Legion. Yeah, you didn't even notice, did you? That's how slow it is. Meaning as long as it's physically possible to avoid damage, I can beat this. It's just a question of how long. And that scared the hell out of me. I knew I wasn't going to be able to rest comfortably knowing it was at least technically possible. If I managed to reach a definite no, I could at least give up happily, but that was off the table. Anyways, the big log is resistant to fire. Not immune, but resistant. I used my cube and magazines to get Legion back faster. I learned his fight to the point that I could burn him for a while. You essentially have to charge up the fire blast by burning continuously for a bit, and the damage is incredibly worth it. Arguably necessary, even. When the boss falls over, it's a great chance to roast him. The burn dot is hard to put on him, and doesn't do a ton, but every little. Also, I have a damage bonus for having more than half my Legion gauge filled, so that's a thing. Not sure how much it actually did. I used some of the physical items to do some more stun damage. Also more or less just threw things at him for the sake of getting some damage in while wasting my time waiting for things to regenerate and to get a good opening. Almost everything that I did through this fight came off the back of my firearm, which is ironically not my gun arm. And I am so sorry to this beautiful piece of machinery that I didn't upgrade you sooner. Vanini's parents died to a puppet. One that did it just because. Despite his status, despite his skill, he's here trying to help people, risking his own health and burning his own resources where he doesn't have to. He's kind of an ass, but he's a good person. A caring and kind person that is an asset to those around him. He's a good friend, and he's better than this. Which is why today's lesson doesn't come from him. Rust in hell, you disgusting little creature. Speaking of, one out only for themselves. He didn't amount to anything more than a footnote. I got some difficult mobbing, but it was made a lot easier by my hand. It genuinely wasn't that hard to push through via the flames. Actually being able to kill things and recover most of what I spent in the process. It's amazing. I would find the right hand of the big bad. One of the lesser designs from this game in my eyes. Phase 1 has a really cool fight. Nothing all that complicated, granted. Mostly just a lot of dodging through movesets that were clearly designed around getting in your head. Combos that would seem to end, then continue thrice over. Weird delays and timing that aren't too bad in the grand scheme of things, which of course means there is a Phase 2. Phase 1, unfortunately, just became a game of bursting her down before she could do too much harm to my summon. I'm bad at dodging her projectiles, so having them all not target me was incredibly helpful in Phase 2. When things went back to a more ordinary fight, I went back to throwing things. It was almost exclusively a question of whether or not I died to her opening attack in the phase transition. I then found the Not Shrine Maiden tortured by Simon by her every waking moment, and I left to do more mobbing. This was significantly harder, and got progressively more so, as things tend to, but it eventually led me to her. Weirdly, she's genuinely difficult. She covers massive distances extremely fast, and only ever stops attacking for a moment. Do you heal from the damage you just took, or do you fight back? Well, both are the wrong answer, because she has a series of red attacks, and the only way to win is to not play the game. By spending most of your time running from her, you can eventually gain enough distance so that you can safely throw something and repeat. Especially with a stun of items like the shot put and the debuff of electric, even I could get through this in relative comfort. That red attack is garbage though. I found my dad, who I don't trust at all, and made my way up to the final confrontation. Credit where it's due, they never threw a 3-phase boss at you, which I appreciate. But this dude was here to greet me and throw hands. And by hands, I mean fire and random objects. My Spectre took a lot of his attention, which just let me kind of roast him. Otherwise, he's a big dude with a hammer. Phase 2 is a lot more interesting, but still a bit underwhelming. For those that don't know though, you can just straight up be too far away for his god hand attack to hit you, which is really neat. Despite allegedly being a deity though, he could be easily defeated by a duffel bag full of hardware. Genuinely an easy fight considering all the things that I've been through. And finally, Pops. I've just got to give him my heart and I can be a real boy. But you're saying that like I'm not already a person. See, I was meant to be the vessel through which he could resurrect his son. Just a token to be redeemed in his sick little game, and of course, when abusers can't win through words, welcome to the real final boss. Totally optional. You can choose to simply give up your heart, give up your humanity and your life to someone who just uses others for his own gains. Funny. A monster wants to make me into what I already am. when he doesn't realize what he's become. Through the fight, he repeats the line, "You're just a puppet, nothing more." It's funny how you've rationalized that in your head. I'm not perfectly like you, so I'm not a person at all. Though I dream, though I feel, still I have to prove myself to you. I have to earn any semblance of humanity, but you feel that it's owed to you in turn. I yearn for the day that people like you are a thing of the past. That we can rise above the hate that you spew with your every breath, though you call it love. Phase 1 is best handled with the gun arm. Upgraded, it can fire twice in a row after a dodge to keep moving. Running away at a slight angle is significantly better than trying to dodge or parry. It'll almost always miss, which works fantastically for baiting and retaliating. You then get a funny little animation where I swing the air at the boss to cut its head open because the game just expects you to be holding something here. And I am different. Among your kind, that makes me a target. Among mine, it makes me a friend. Someone who knows the pain you cause, who stands with them against your evils. This fight was brutal. Phase 2 deals incredible amounts of damage at rapid pace. A ton of its moveset is either a 1 or 2 shot. You can sidestep its red attack, and you can dodge through most of its others with extremely careful play. As many times as it killed me though, I was determined. For many reasons, I was determined. Had I upgraded my health at least once, this might have gone a little bit more smoothly, but let me put it simply. I am me. I will not lie nor shift to be what you'd like. I am a puppet, and I am so much more. Complex to the core, I am many things. In this case, failing all else, I'm a stubborn bastard. After the phase transition, it pulls out a few incredibly dangerous moves. It's best to slap him around with the shot put to stun him, then lay into him with acid. When you inflict it, it increases the damage you deal with acid, and it's a lot. It took some learning, but in the end, as it turns out, I never needed a weapon at all. Because you've molded me into the perfect kind for killing monsters like you. Now tell me, Father, are you proud of what you've created? With a bit of time to reflect and another Souls-like in the books, I hope you enjoyed your time here. You probably know how to use social media, and I hope that means I'll get to hear your thoughts now and on a future outings. A huge thanks to my lovely channel members. You know who you are, and I know that you are a phenomenal help. To everyone though, don't be afraid to let your colors shine. You are better because you're different, not in spite of it. And until the next time, remember to stay safe, spread some kindness in the world, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.